This is James Lupton for Round 8 Boxing, sponsored by Upton Clan Builders, and I'm delighted to join with Adam Smith. And Adam, today we're going to go through your top 10 fights that you've commentated on. So you have sent me a list of 10 fights. It was 11, but we've gone back down to 10. And we're going to start with
I
fight.
wasn't very good at maths at school, James.
So this, I don't know if you can tell me if this is in a particular order or not. And as you said to me, these are all for different reasons. And I think from looking at the list, all these fights sum up boxing and why we love boxing as well. So we'll go through these one by one. So in at number 10, Derek Roach, excuse me, against Scott Dixon. British title, and I think Commonwealth title was on the line as well. A really exciting fight. Just tell me all your memories from that fight.
Yeah, I mean, all these fights, James. I mean, I've been fortunate enough to commentate on thousands of different boxing matches, events at all sorts of levels. So these are the 10 that sort of spring to mind, as you said, for various reasons. And sometimes the dust ups you get for the Lonsdale belt are just the best because I think fighters want to win a British title so much. It's a beautiful belt. It's got so much history. And there's a couple on my list, two or three, I think, which are for the British title. I mean, sometimes titles are irrelevant, but I think in certain cases, it's a really proud treasure. You talk to a lot of domestic fighters, and the British title almost is their favourite in many ways. So yeah, obviously basing myself mainly in the UK over the last 30 years, I've been lucky enough to have seen some of the great domestic guts off the likes of Michael Gomez and Alex Arthur, which springs straight to mind. But I didn't call that one. I did have the opportunity to commentate on Derek Roach and Scott Dixon. It was an absolute humdinger. I like both of the guys. They were really down to earth, honest pros who had different styles. Scott Dixon, I don't know if you remember, pipped Jamie Moore on the way up. He overcame Jamie and handed Moore his first defeat. And he was an awkward, skillful, very brave fighter. And Derek was aggressive, strong, had that great jab, the Irish heritage, and a big man for Leeds. So yeah, it was a really interesting fight, and it just turned out into an absolute 12-round war, a classic. I think there were five knockdowns between them. Derek came out victorious, but it was they represented everything that we love about this sport. The two of them went pretty much toe to toe for the whole 36 minutes. There was huge amounts of respect at the end. It was just a wonderful fight that will always stay with me. So yeah, number 10, I'm going for Roach against Dixon. I saw Derek a while ago actually. I'd love to see Scott. But yeah, it's nice that they had that. I think sometimes you look at the great rivalries through the years, the Ali Fraziers, the Bo Holyfields, and the Fury Wilders, all of those that we talk about and know about, and the casual audience does. But sometimes you don't know, or people don't think enough about the trade fights. And for me, Derek Roach and Scott Dixon will forever be entwined in British boxing history together. And it was an absolutely fantastic fight.
I think Scott Dixon, looking at his box rec before I come on the call, he's still fighting, fought last year based in Malta.
Yeah, I know he's spent a lot of time out in Malta. He's a conditioner, I think, these days. I think he does a lot of work in fitness. So yeah, look, I like to see fighters who have finished continue to look after themselves, both mentally and physically, and it's great to know that they're in great shape. I know Derek does a lot of different business things now, and he comes up with all sorts of ideas for boxing as well, which is great. They're just, yeah, they're solid, salt of the earth, down to earth, great fighters, and I've got so much respect for them and what they did that night. I think it was in 1999, and it was definitely in Coventry, which was sort of the middle of the country for them both. Scott Dixon, I think, had Scottish heritage and was training in London. And I mean, really got to dig deep in the memory banks. But what I do remember is the fight, and it was an absolute classic.
Absolutely. Number 9, more of a modern fight. Alexander Usyk versus Daniel Dubois 2, the rematch. Obviously, Usyk prevailed, victorious, fifth round knockout. It was an unbelievable shot in the fifth that folded Daniel Dubois. Recall that fight for me and why you enjoyed that one so much.
Yeah, not the greatest fight. There's been many better battles that I've called over the years, but But this one stands out for me. I sort of felt I had to have Alexander Usyk on the list. He's been a modern great, and I was there for and commentated on his wins over AJ, his second win over Fury, etc., and other cruiserweight fights. But for me, there was something about a and yes, Daniel Dubois coming off the AJ win had a lot of people on his side, but there was something about the Ukraine and everything that that country had been through, and the yellow and blue lights at Wembley that night last summer. It was a really special occasion, and yes, Usyk was expected to come through. He'd beaten Daniel Dubois before. They had the controversy of whether that blow was low or not. And I think going into it, I think most of us felt Usyk would find a way again. But Dubois came in really good form. And there was that energy that he brought after tipping over AJ at the National Stadium. But yeah, there's something about Wembley and the summer. And I just thought the production was phenomenal. And Usyk coming out that night was just something. And of course, becoming undisputed for the third time, twice at heavyweight and at cruiserweight, unprecedented stuff. So I think for moments, that will sit right up there. I mean, that summer we also had almost made the list. Fabio Wardley coming from behind to knock out Justice Hooney with one right hand, and the drama of boxing. So you can pick all sorts of fights, but for me, that was a very special one. The Queensbury promotion on DAZN, and I've had so many on Sky over the years, but that for a DAZN production was, I thought, extraordinary. You look back at that ring walk, I thought it was one of the greatest ones ever, the Usyk one when he came out, and yeah, it was a phenomenal finish, as you say. It was definitive, conclusive, and no doubts. And sometimes when you get these decisions and people swear one way or the other, and there's that sort of debate and discussion that we love in boxing, but almost slightly sours the victory. There was no doubt that Usyk has commanded both the cruiserweight and heavyweight division, and doing the double over the likes of AJ and Usyk and beating Chisora, and then doing the double over Dubois sort of sealed his place forever for me. And to do it again away from home, but what felt like it was a small part of Ukraine that night in North London with the yellow and the blue and the noise. Very, very special night, I thought.
You mentioned about the production and the yellow and the blue lights and these moments that you say there. Because you're working and you're on the commentary, you're on the mic constantly throughout this event. Can you be present and enjoy that as well?
That's a really good point. My dad said to me a couple of times over the years, "Don't forget to remember where you are." And sometimes I take the headphones off at the start of ring walks, just to listen to the noise and to the music. And it could have been like it was in Nottingham with Wood Warrington last weekend, or it could have been like it is at Wembley at a huge stadium show, or it could be at York Hall, Bethnal Green. I think sometimes you have to do that. Occasionally, at the beginning of nights, I go to the back of the hall, arena, wherever, and just sort of have a look down and yeah, just appreciate where we are and appreciate that none of us would be here without the bravery of the fighters that are about to get in that ring. So yeah, I think you do have to savor these moments. I think sometimes earlier in my career, it was so busy and there was so much going on that you just concentrated specifically on your job, which was to call a fight. But I think over the years, I've learned to utilize that event to have moments and experience the whole thing. And I think that sets you in a better place for the next time, because you almost take the fans' point of view, or you feel the atmosphere or the energy or the place you're in. So yeah, I think it's really important now to take that moment in. My dad has given me many words of wisdom over the years, and that's just one of them. Just to breathe it in at times.
Absolutely. Fight number 8, Amir Khan, Marcos Maidana.
Wow.
Amir Khan won on points. He sort of started well, came through it. Maidana got a point deducted. Then it looked like towards the end, Maidana was going to beat Amir Khan. It was, again, another thrilling fight. Again, what's your memories from that one?
Amir Khan, Kell Brook, Ricky Hatton, so many of those fighters have given us so many thrills. I went for this one because it just was a fabulous fight. And it was in the Golden Tower of Mandalay Bay, which I had a love affair, I think, with. There were so many great fights back around that time. I think Khan Maidana was 2010, maybe. I think, something like that, December 2010. I might be wrong, but about 15, 16 years ago. And in those sort of early noughties, Mandalay Bay was the place to be. It was like the first after MGM, which Tyson had and then Mayweather had. The Mandalay Bay had these sort of cracking lighter fights, and so we were always there. So I think the hotel and the venue was special. There was a lot of heat in the build up, and there was so much heat in the ring. I think Khan again was expected to win fairly comfortably, and when he floored Maidana with that crippling body shot, I think in the first or second round, right early in the fight, and you never thought Maidana was going to make it, but we saw what Marcus was made of that night, and we also saw what Amir was made of. People had sort of given him a hard time after Bredis Prescott had come over and thrashed him in under a minute in Manchester, and people worried about the chin and all the rest of it, and said, "Oh, he's just fast hands and talent, but he's got no defense and bravery." Well, he showed so much bravery in that fight at the back end. They both did. I thought the pair of them covered themselves in glory, courageous, battled to the end. Khan won the fight, but Maidana won our hearts. So it was just a tremendous 12-round fight, and one I'll always remember. Yeah, super lightweight division. I think again, it doesn't really matter. Sometimes you forget the weight class or what it was even for. It was definitely a world title on the line, but I don't think it mattered. It was just an unbelievable fight between two really, really top draw boxers. Were they as good as Mayweather, Pacquiao, maybe Roy Jones, De La Hoya at their best? No, but they were the next little notch down. Khan was a great fighter, and so was Maidana, and they gave us so much to remember. I saw Marcus actually in Saudi Arabia a few months ago, and it was just great seeing him. It just, I hadn't seen him for a long time, and he was there with another Argentinian fighter, and you know what? It's just fabulous. It was like these guys and these girls are heroes, heroines to me, and it was, yeah, it's amazing when you see them. And every time I see Amir now, it's I'm very friendly with him, and he's a lovely guy, but you forget what he gave us in the ring, and these guys put their lives on the line, and yeah, that was an absolute thriller.
Absolutely. Fight seven. This one I'm excited to speak to you about because it was your first big fight that you covered. You told me earlier today, and that was Eric Morales, Juan Carlos Ramirez. Morales won that fight. Ramirez retired on his stool at the end of the ninth round. What was that like for you to go over to America and, like you say, your first big fight you're commentating on? How did you feel in terms of pressure?
Nervous, anxious. I wanted to do this since I was a 9-year-old boy, and my first delve into the commentary territory came a few weeks before in Derby, where I am tomorrow, actually. Carl Thompson fighting Johnny Nelson. It was Johnny's world title win finally before his many, many defenses, 13 defenses, his legendary status, and my great friend in boxing. But yeah, deep on that card, I had a chance to commentate. It was a fight that I don't even think we recorded, but it was a chance to give me a go, and it was never going to see light of day. And I remember having the mic in my hand. It was a 4-rounder, and my director says, "Okay, in 5 seconds, ads, off you go." And the PA counted down, and 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The bell went, and I just remember this silence and thinking, what happens now? Oh my God, idiot, you got to talk, right? And I remember that moment, and it was almost like I was 27 at the time, maybe. And so for almost 20 years, I've been waiting for a chance to do this. And when it came, I nearly blew it straight away. So yeah, there's obvious nerves and butterflies and apprehension. And then my boss said, after that, he said, "Oh, by the way, there's a big fight in England, which I want Ian Dark to commentate on. We're going to send you to Vegas, you and Jim Watt, to do Eric Morales against Juan Carlos Ramirez." And I'm like, Eric Morales is one of the greatest super bantamweights that's ever lived. I'm thinking I'm going to be covering him, and it was in the Vegas Hilton where Elvis used to sing, and I was like, "Oh my God, I can't believe I'm doing this." And I remember going for a steak and chips the night before with Jim Watt, and he just calmed me down and talked to me about the sport and talked to me about what it would be like. And we worked together for a number of years, Jim and I learned so much off him. He was just the greatest co-commentator I think we've ever seen. Just so knowledgeable, so calm, so passionate as well, so intelligent in his commentary. So yeah, it was just an honor and a privilege to be alongside Jim. It was an honor and a privilege to be commentating on Eric Morales. I think it was a defense of his maybe WBC super bantamweight crown. I can't even remember, against Ramirez. And I just do remember he landed a corkscrew right uppercut that was just extraordinary. I thought he was an unbelievable super bantam, and one of the greats of all time. Morales, I love the Morales, Barrera, Marquez, sort of three of them, the Axis, and yeah, something about Mexican fighters. And Eric and Marco I became close to over the years, and one from Tijuana, one from Mexico City, one from a very difficult environment growing up, one from a middle class family, and yeah, just amazing stories. And I'm a storyteller, as you know, James, and that's what really hooked me. But for that fight, it was just the fact that it was my first big fight to commentate on, so it sticks with you. It's 27 odd years ago. I mean, it seems a lifetime, but it almost seems like yesterday when I had that call to go over. And I remember just being so nervous on the plane. And yeah, the nerves quickly go. And I think as you commentate over the years, it's just experience and knowing how to control that. You still get the excitement and the passion. I mean, I'm as excited about commentating on a British title fight in Derby tomorrow night as I was that day. But it's just the way I think you deal with your nerves. And like fighters, you get more experience as you go through your career and how you deal with ring walks and getting into the ring. And it's the same, I guess, for broadcasters. You just get a little bit more seasoned, and yeah, you know sort of where to channel those nerves and that adrenaline. But yeah, I remember that. I was really scared. And I remember Ian Dark also saying to me, in those first 3 years of your commentary, you won't be able to listen back to any of it because it will just be this high squeaky pitch and that'll be it. So yeah, apologies for those commentaries. But yeah, they were that was my foundation.
Was that the first and maybe the biggest pinch me moment of your career?
Do you know what? I tell you where a real pinch me moment was. I was in New York and I was walking towards Madison Square Garden, and it was the first unification in the heavyweight division for some time. Obviously, Lennox Lewis and Evander Holyfield had unified, and Lewis had become the undisputed champion November '99 in Vegas. This was a few years later, and it was Vladimir Klitschko and Sultan Ibragimov, and they were unifying the division. And I remember walking to the garden again. I remember calling my dad and saying, "Dad, I'm about to commentate on the unified heavyweight championship of the world in the garden. It doesn't get any better." Now, the fight stunk the place out. Okay, we can't control what happens when the bell goes, but that was a pinch me moment when and sometimes when I'm coming into these fights, and as I say, whether it's a little arena in Derby, whether it's York Hall, whether it's the Copper Box, whether it's the Manchester Arena, the O2, whether it's stadium shows, whether it was Oberhausen recently in Agate Cabayel, sometimes you just have to prepare yourself for those moments and enjoy them. And I remember thinking that was a pinch me moment when I was in New York thinking, I'm doing the heavyweight championship of the world. I remember this actually, James, thinking if it all finishes today, I will have no regrets. And thankfully it hasn't, and I've continued doing what I love. But yeah, certain pinch me moments. Yeah, I don't know, the Don King days, the Bob Arum days, the Tyson days. There's so many, working with Holyfield, working with Oscar De La Hoya for so many fights. There's so much. Joe Calzaghe from when he was a kid, watching him come through. Ricky, obviously, now so many. But that was a real pinch me moment in terms of commentary. Wow, I'm going to be going to the Garden and doing a heavyweight championship. That was mad.
Fantastic. Fight six on the list, Floyd Mayweather and Juan Manuel Marquez. Obviously, Floyd won that on points. What was it like to see Floyd in the flesh, somebody who's considered as one of the best, if not the best?
I was going to go for AJ and Ruiz at six, obviously in the Garden, that massive upset. That was one of the greatest sort of fights and nights. But I've got another AJ one down the line. So I thought I'd go for Mayweather because for me, Floyd Mayweather was the greatest fighter I've ever seen live. Yes, Usyk, yes, Lomachenko, yes, Sugar Shane, yes, Roy Jones, yes, Lennox, so many others. But for me, there was something about Mayweather and what he did in the ring. I used to love him as a super featherweight. I thought he was phenomenal. when he was beating the likes of Angel Manfredi and Diego Corrales. And I just thought he was probably the greatest super featherweight that's ever lived. And he was a puncher. But it was the way that he adapted himself over the years through the weights. And that his defensive strategy and brilliance weren't everyone's cup of tea, but I just loved watching him. I just thought he was a genius at work. I thought he was a genius in the ring. He's the best fighter I've ever seen train, and he's the best, maybe apart from Usyk, but he's the best fighter I've ever seen train, I think, certainly that generation, and the best fighter I've ever seen live. And I picked Mayweather Marquez because it was an occasion. Mayweather's always going to win that fight. Marquez was too small, and also Marquez was a wonderful, wonderful fighter in his own right. But yeah, Mayweather at times got the right opponents, but I think for that it was the magnitude of the occasion. It was at the MGM Grand, which was Mayweather's home, September 2009, I think. But I remember, and you say pinch me moments, I remember looking around me, and I remember looking back and seeing Leonardo DiCaprio, Meg Ryan, Schwarzenegger, Nicholson. I think Posh and Bex were there. There were others, music stars. And they were all behind us. And it was like, what? This is just crazy. I mean, Mayweather attracted A-list celebs. When we had Mayweather Pacquiao, I remember like Justin Rose and Rory McIlroy, a lot of the golfers being there. And I remember walking past, I was presenting from the top of the arena and walking down through the MGM towards the commentary spot. And I passed Ian Poulter and Justin Rose in the gods, going, oh, go on, Adam, have a good one. And I'm like, this is mental. And then I passed Sting and all these. This is crazy. And Mayweather did that. And that fight with Marquez, that row of just, I love cinema. I love De Niro and Nicholson and all of I love theatre, cinema, and all that, and just to see so many on that row, like A-listers. Brad Pitt was there, Angelina Jolie. I mean, just extraordinary. So yeah, that was the fight itself. I can't remember much about the fight. No, Mayweather dominated it and looked brilliant. And I think he was about 38, 39 and 0 at the time, so it was real peak Mayweather. And Marquez had lost before, and he was never expected to win, so it wasn't about that. For me, it was about the occasion. So I put that one in for the celebrity event that boxing can attract, and yeah, that's one I dine out on still.
Absolutely. So from Floyd Mayweather to Jamie Moore, fight number five. Jamie Moore, Matt Macklin, British title fight once again. Wow, what a fight.
Yeah, I picked Roach and Dixon early on. I mentioned Alex Arthur and Michael Gomez upsetting him in Edinburgh, but this one I think was better than both of those. 10 rounds. It was a really difficult one for Ricky Hatton, my friend Ricky, who was a childhood friend of Jamie Moore's. They'd been in the amateurs together. And Matt Macklin was his stablemate because they both trained under Billy Graham at the time. So Billy was with Matt, and they had to somehow come through the southpaw brilliance that was Jamie Moore, who is a great friend of mine in the business today and one of the best trainers in the world. And I was actually chatting to him last weekend. He still looks so fit, and he should have been a world champion. He had that wonderful trilogy with Michael Jones, just such an exciting southpaw fighter who had skills, who had so much. He was just so good to watch, Jamie. But when he turned his boxing skills on, like he did that night against Macklin, he was just brilliant. And he was just a little bit too defensively clever for Matt. Matt came out like a bull in a china shop. Matt, who, again, one of my best friends in boxing, I commentated for years with alongside me at Sky, one of the most intelligent fighters there's ever been. I remember Frank saying he was the British Oscar de la Hoya. He gave up a law degree to fight. Had all the looks, didn't he, and all the charisma, and just brilliant. Matt, again, should have become world champion against Felix Sturm. Matt and Jamie in this generation, I'm sure they both would have world title belts, but they were fighting for a British title. So again, it didn't really matter at what level this was. This was two world-class fighters fighting for the treasured, coveted Lonsdale belt, which brings the best out. And I think because friendship was just put to one side and it was all about business, it was just an extraordinary night. It was in Altrincham, or it was certainly Manchester area, but it was a small arena, but it was just packed. The atmosphere was incredible, and unfortunately, the knockout was savage. So Matt was taken off to hospital, but it was great that Jamie and Ricky, they all went to see him. Everyone was friends afterwards, and then what happened, of course, was that Matt carried on, and Jamie trained him, and so that was a great story that they bared their souls and spirits in the ring over those 10 unbelievably intense rounds. And what happened was they had that future together where they had that respect, and then they changed roles, and one became a trainer and a fighter. Now one's a trainer, one's a commentator. They're both still very important in this business. They still look fantastic. It's great. It's a great story all round. But on the night, wow, what a brutal fight. Yeah, Matt I think just left too much. It was a steam train, wasn't it? And maybe that was the way he would win it. And Jamie just was a little bit cuter. And I remember him tucking up at times on the ropes with that southpaw guard. And yeah, what a fight! What a fight! I still think probably the greatest British title fight we've ever had.
I agree completely. This, for me, is my favourite British title fight by far. Fight number four, Danny Williams, Mark Potter. Now, this one was there's a big degree of shock in this fight. So Danny Williams dislocated his shoulder in the third round and went on to win by stoppage in the sixth. What was it like for you, Rings, when you see him, no use of one arm, obviously no guard on that side? What was that like?
It's only two or three times that I've been off my chair at ringside. Actually, I think the Fabio Wardley one last year might have been one of them. And certainly my number one on this list had me off my feet, but this was off my feet, and it was a busy weekend, if I remember rightly, on Sky. It was 2000, and I think we'd been to Belfast the night before, and we'd done Jim Rock, the Pink Panther, who was a cracking cult character in Northern Ireland at one point. And then the next night we had a big show in the States. Maybe it was a Tyson night, and there was a British leg to it, and it was at the Wembley Conference Centre. Ricky Hatton fought John Thaxton, which was a great British title fight as well, when he got cut early, Ricky, in the first 30 seconds of the fight, and Jono pushed him the whole way. It was a really good fight, that. And then we had this, so I think voices were lost, and we were already on fumes, trying to get through it. Can't even remember. I think it was Jim against. It was Jim, because I think he said at the end, if you'd seen it in a Rocky story, you wouldn't believe it. Yeah, what a fight. I mean, how can you say Jim McDonnell in the corner with Danny Williams? And Danny had a reputation of being sick on the way to fights, stopping in petrol stations and not sure whether he'd actually sort of want to go to the event, to the venue. And then this is the same guy that stood up to Mike Tyson and beat him, almost beat the bully. I mean, one of the most astonishing wins of all time, really, for a British fighter. But that night, yeah, I mean, what he had to go through. I mean, I'd seen sort of dislocated shoulders before. Dean Francis did it. I think Carl Thompson, Ralph Rocchigiani maybe won, or Graziano Rocchigiani. There's been times that shoulders have been dislocated before, but Danny had his shock, and still, God, I still wince in pain thinking about it. Danny had his arm out of his socket, and he went back to the corner, I think, after the third round. You're right. And Jim was like, and the boys were trying to get it back in. And Jim Watt was like, there's no way that he can continue. And he went on, and he carried on and barely used it. And Mark Potter was a tough, strong heavyweight, British title on the line. And Danny was still doing okay. But then when it went again, you thought, there's no way. It was hanging down. I mean, it was, where's the towel? Where's the referee stopping it? But the fight was allowed to go on, and he wins it with one arm, with an uppercut that Potter walked into, and then the finishing follow-up. I think it was in the sixth round, and the excellent, poor, great late Mark Potter, who we adored, found himself, unfortunately for him and his support, on the end of one of the most incredible victories, I think, of all time in a British boxing ring. Danny Williams winning the fight with one arm. And, as a heavyweight, it just goes to show that you've still got that power. But to even set yourself, you think that you've trained and you worked so hard in camp, and you got the use of two arms and two legs, and you get into a ring and one arm is you can't use. I mean, sometimes fighters break their hand and they cover it up well, or they use the jab maybe to a lesser extent. But to actually have a shoulder hanging out and be just reliant on one left arm is very, very difficult. And especially again with heavyweights who aren't the most fleet-footed, but they've got the power. And that uppercut was an uppercut from the gods that night. And yeah, that was one of the most unbelievable fights I've ever seen. So Williams Potter has to be on the list.
I think it's one of those moments where if you ask boxing fans what's the first thing comes to your mind about Danny Williams, most will probably say the dislocated shoulder over the Mike Tyson fight.
I look, I mean, I think because Tyson was beaten by others as well. I think if it would been like the Buster Douglas night, people don't forget that was the night that shocked the boxing world, right? We talk about AJ Ruiz or others, but that night, Buster Douglas beating Tyson. I remember where I was. I was in an American university at the time. I was in a frat party, and there were footballers, American footballers, in floods of tears when the news filtered through that the great Mike Tyson had been beaten in Tokyo. I think that was probably the most seismic upset in modern boxing history. But I think you're right. I think when people think about Danny Williams, they think of that moment. How on earth did he win that fight? Yes, he went and beat Tyson, but Tyson had been beaten before. I mean, who wins a fight in those circumstances? It's almost impossible. And he made it possible. I mean, I think Danny's gone on too long in his career, and unfortunately, but I just, yeah, for that moment, I'll always remember Danny for that, and yeah, just extraordinary.
Absolutely. Fight number three, back to another modern classic. Chris Eubank Jr., Conor Benn won. Chris Eubank Jr. won that fight on points. I mean, for me, it was outstanding. It far surpassed expectations. Really, really good. What was it like being in there and soaking up that atmosphere?
Oh, just it's what we live for these times, don't we? We live for these nights. I've always said Tottenham Hotspur. I'm a Liverpool fan, so Spurs are one of the enemies. But I've always said Tottenham Hotspur Stadium is one of the greatest stadiums I've ever been to in the entire world. I think it is such a great, beautifully built stadium, and it's fabulous for boxing. Great going back there for Fury Makhmedov, and of course we had the AJ Usyk fight there. Tyson's fought there before, and yeah, and it was just an unbelievable night. The build up of all build ups, with everything that had happened to Connor and the egg smashing and the Eubank manipulating the press conferences with Eddie and all of that, and it was just. But still, people were like, "This is a circus. There's just no, that what's the fight going to be like? Eubank's way too big for him. Connor's got to prove himself for so many reasons." And I think Connor had to prove himself as well because he'd been out of the ring a long time. He was stepping up to middleweight, and Chris had had to drain himself down. There were so many factors going into it. And of course, would Chris Sr. turn up? We didn't think he would. He then turned up, so it was the four of them. So, I mean, it was just all the theatre, all the drama. Of an incredible story. But the most brilliant part of that story was the fight was epic. The second fight, I enjoyed the ring walks more, of course. Who walked out? Chris Eubank, the drums for Connor, and the Connor performance was brilliant that night. But the fight, as a commentary, it was extraordinary. And I didn't know who was going to win at various times. I remember Declan Rice was sitting right behind us. He's a big boxing fan, and he's a mate of Conor Benn's, and he said to me after the fifth round, he tapped me on the shoulder. He went, "Ad, what do you think? Do you think Connor's got a chance here?" And I remember saying, I said, "I think he might win this." And of course he didn't. And Chris was fantastic in the last two or three rounds. He really put the finishing touches on. But it was a great performance from Conor Benn. It was a phenomenal performance from Eubank, and that the punch rate and variety in those last 6 minutes as well. But all the way through it ebbed and flowed and was just a toe-to-toe slugfest. And I know people say afterwards, "Oh, it wasn't a world elite fight. It was more of a sort of a brawl." Oh, come on, it was excitement, entertainment, thrill a minute from start to finish. Ring Magazine. their fight of the year, everyone's fight of 2025, one of the great fights of all time in any ring, in any country, at any era. And we were privileged enough to be part of it. So if you'd gone and seen Chris and Connor after the fights and to see how much it had taken out of both of them, they didn't need to do that. They bared their souls in there. And that's where the respect really started to become. And yeah, they don't like each other. Yeah, they're like Frotch and Groves. They're never going to hang out socially together. But the respect that these fighters get for each other after all the needle and the hate weren't quite as much second time around before the rematch because they knew that they were entwined in those rounds. And the beauty of it is that their fathers before them had done the same thing. They'd given us that absolute phenomenal fight in Birmingham. The rematch never quite lived up to it because they couldn't go there again. But that first fight, wow. And we all hoped that round number 13 was going to be as intense, but we all knew it was never quite going to be as grueling because sometimes you just got to say, yeah, you can't really beat that. And that first fight was one of those. Eubank, Ben won. The kids, yeah, stands on my top 10, and it'd be hard pressed to push it out of my top 10 as long as they go on for.
I mean, you said there that fight, epic. It was unbelievable action from start to finish, as you say, and that's only number three. So let's go on to number two. Anthony Joshua, Vladimir Klitschko, AJ wins TKO round 11. This was really, I think, a big moment for British boxing on a whole. What was it like for you in there, obviously at Wembley? That I think the whole country was behind Anthony Joshua.
It was in many ways the pinnacle of everything we'd done at Sky Sports over those years, the days of Frank Warren, those big nights, and then Eddie Hearn and the sort of the huge sort of build that boxing had going from arenas into stadium shows. We'd had Frotch Groves, of course. We had Mayweather Pacquiao in Vegas. We had some of these big fights that were happening. And AJ, of course, had become the huge attraction after the Olympics, the golden boy, the poster boy, and yeah, look, we've seen some thunderous heavyweight battles. I mean, Fury and Wilder three, and yeah, the likes of Bowe and Holyfields, and loads of other great tussles at heavyweight. But this was one of ours at Sky, and it was one we were wrapped around. The business was wrapped around it, so there was a huge amount that was put into the 12, 14 week training camps for both of them, but also for us. The Cobra committees at Sky, getting the best out, making sure that all the programming was right. The gloves are off. The countdown sort of style thing, sports news, Sky News, the promos, the creativity, everything that was sort of put into that, let alone the production and the technical side of putting on an event as big as that, 90,000 at Wembley. And what we had was, yeah, the young, hopeful heavyweight, good looking, the guy that was sort of the heir apparent almost. I mean, he had won a world title, but it was like he hadn't beaten somebody of this magnitude. And Klitschko, who'd reigned supreme for a long time, who'd had his ups and downs, but yeah, was such a great athlete and such an intelligent guy, and there's huge respect they had for each other. Normally you have the needle, the hate, but this was just great, sort of almost like they knew, and they were supreme athletes, and it was all down to what happened in the ring. And you had Jonathan Banks from Manny Stewart's camp, and so you had the sort of history of Vladimir's base and being out with him in camp in Austria, and AJ and Rob McCracken and everything that had been built in Britain with Sky and AJ. And as you say, the country was behind AJ, but it was one of these fights, and it doesn't happen all the time, where we get the limelight, we get our time in the sun. Football just for a moment just stops. The casual fans, the traffic, everything just halts. Where were you when AJ and Klitschko fought? And I know that there were millions watching, of course, and I think it was in 150 countries, and Sky Sports box office and all of those things. But the 90 odd thousand at Wembley, I've chatted to many people who were there that night, whether they were up in the bleachers or they were down at ringside. Everybody remembers that fight and that night, April 2017. They remember it. And I mean, for us at Sky, we'd never entered awards before, but football and cricket had taken all the broadcasting awards. But for that night, everyone said, right, you've got to go and people have got to put you up for awards. And the team had come together and had produced, so many great people had produced that broadcasting thing. And we went on that year to win the broadcast award and the RTS and be nominated for BAFTAs and all of that. That was on a broadcast level. As a fight level, as a heavyweight fight, all of that build up. And we had at Sky the press conference and thousands there and just something different. And then the bell goes. And I always used to say to my team at Sky, when the bell goes, there's nothing we can do. It's totally out of our control. It's up to the fighters. But again, a bit like Ben and Eubank, for that fight, the two boys just delivered. It was a heavyweight fight for the ages. It was a modern heavyweight classic. I was with Carl Froch and Deontay Wilder at ringside calling it. We had Deontay there, right by us on the mic. It was just an unbelievable night. And it was one of those that, as I said, I took my headphones off and breathed it in. Extraordinary. The fact that AJ was, one punch away from defeat, two punches, both of them down at fairly early. What was going to happen middle rounds, and then he pulls it out the fire in the 11th. Amazing. And it was that night lift off for AJ, and it was his peak. I think. I don't think he's ever had a night like that since. There's been great nights. There's been some tough ones, some wins, some losses, some bigger money fights, probably all of that. But I don't know if he's ever had a night like that. A bit like Hatton and Sue. That night where it just Calzaghe and Lacey. That night where it just you remember and think. You're not going to do that. Naz and Kelly, there won't be another. And for me, that was AJ Klitschko. And it's incredible to see, Joshua still in his career all these years later. Vladimir Klitschko, rumors that he's coming out of retirement to become the oldest heavyweight challenger or maybe even champion in history. Who knows? We wait and see. We've got Mayweather, Pacquiao. Anything's possible in this business. But yeah, if we just go down memory lane a bit and bask in the glory of AJ and Klitschko and what a night, the respect, the just brilliant for the sport, the pair of them, and a brilliant night, a wonderful fight, a wonderful build-up occasion. It's just one, James, for me, where the stars were out, everything aligned, and it was boxing at its very best. The blue ribbon division, two heroes, the respect between the pair afterwards. I walked home down Wembley Way that night and I just thought, it doesn't get any better than that.
No, absolutely. You say it doesn't get any better than that. Let's go to fight number one. So this, it might not even be the fight. It could just be the one round. Castillo Corrales won TKO round 10. It was just a back and forth. It was real shock factor what happened in that round 10. Is it the greatest round of boxing ever?
I think so. I'm sure there's others, many I can think of right now. The 10th of Bo Holyfield one was an absolute humdinger. Ward Gatti, there was a couple of rounds there that were just, there's so many, and it's all subjective. Someone asked me the top five heavyweights of all time the other day, and people were arguing whether Usyk gets in them or not. It's so hard to compare eras and when there were different training techniques and weights and all that sort of stuff. But yeah, I think personally, the fight between, you say things can't get better. I think from a whole point of view, AJ Klitschko for me will be hard to beat. But from a fight point of view, I don't think there's been a better fight in my lifetime than Diego Corrales and Jose Luis Castillo won. I was brought up on Tommy Hearns. Hagler Hearns was the greatest 8.5 minutes probably of all time. We mentioned Bo Holyfield, the Gatti Ward, all of those, the trilogies of modern boxing. Glenn McCrory used to say the first fight between Marco Antonio Barrera and Eric Morales was his favorite and cannot be beaten. So it depends maybe whether you were there, whether you called it, all sorts of different things, and also whether you expect it. I think sometimes when it's not expected, it's even better. Um, and I expected a good fight for the lightweight unification some 21 years ago, May the 7th, 2005, I think, off memory. So coming up to 21 years since that great fight. I had spent time in camp with both of them beforehand. Castillo in the mountains in Mexico. Um, I mean, Jose Luis was a tough guy to get much out of. James, he was, he wasn't your Ricky Hatton. He was very, very hard. Fuck Floyd was. I remember one line he gave me before. He controversially lost that first fight to Mayweather. That's one of the ones Mayweather might have got away with, but that's for another day. I think, yeah, he was a tough guy, but Diego and I got on really, really well. And of course, you can have no bias when you pick up the mic. When you pick up the mic, everything has to go out the window. You call what you see in front of you. Have to do it each and every time. But in the build-up, I spent time with Corrales. I spent a lot of time with Diego, and I was devastated when he lost his life. Devastated. And I was there for the third fight that was never happened at the weigh-in. It was cancelled. The second fight, the weights were all wrong, I thought, and Castillo got his revenge. But it was it should have been a trilogy, and it should have been more than just that first fight. But again, sometimes you can't quite get better than that first fight. Maybe again with Morales and Barrera, it's hard the second time around to go there. That first fight was extraordinary. Unification, lightweight titles. 9 rounds, toe to toe, but skilled toe to toe, phone box stuff in the middle of the ring, neither one giving up any ground, unbelievably courageous. And when Diego Corrales was knocked down twice in the 10th round, yes, okay, the gum shield spat out, maybe did buy him a little bit of time. There was that bit of experience, but it was out, he was gone, he was finished. There was no way. A bit like when Danny Williams got through the shoulder dislocation. How on earth? You just don't know. How did Tyson Fury get up in Deontay Wilder 1? How did Diego Corrales get up? Not just once, but twice in that 10th round. Gone. Eyes in orbit. Nothing left. I mean, a second, 2 seconds away from being stopped. And within a minute, he turned it round and stopped Castillo on the. I still get emotional thinking about it. Stopping Castillo on the ropes. Unbelievable. And I remember calling it, and I think I said something like that was the greatest fight you'll see in 10, 20, 30 years. And I remember putting the mic down afterwards. I was on my feet. I remember thinking, Jesus, I hope I got that right, because it's going to look pretty stupid if I didn't. Like 10, 20, 30 years, that's a big call. Why don't you just keep your gob shut? Why don't you just say it was a great fight or a great finish or something, or one of Jim's Rocky-like endings or whatever? But it was the Jim Watt combination again. I remember putting the mic down. I said to Jim, I hope it was. And I remember just, checking the internet for the next couple of days. And I remember seeing Diego in Vegas a few days later, and he was all bashed and bruised, and he was at a press conference for another fight. And I remember just going up to him and just hugging him and just saying, I don't know how you did it and whatever. And I was just, oh my God, I loved him because he just fought with his heart on his sleeve, even in the defeat to Mayweather. The guy was just an extraordinary human being. He almost had 9 lives in his short life. Phenomenal, phenomenal man. As was Castillo. And in the ring, they just gave us something that will never be forgotten. It's etched in history forever. And I still believe it is one of the greatest fights we have seen in 10, 20, 30, 40 years. For me, I don't think that will ever be beaten. I hope I'm wrong. I hope that there are other fights ahead in 26, 7, 8, 9, etc. that will be trying to hit that top one of my list. But it's so far above the others that it stands on its own. It was unbelievable, extraordinary. And because I guess it's still seen as a trade fight, Corrales and Castillo, not household names, still people say to me, what's the best fight you've commentated on? I say the best nights I've been at are probably Hatton's Hugh and Naz Kelly, but the best fight I've ever commentated on has got to be Corrales Castillo. And they go, when was that? What was that? And I said, just go and watch it. Just go and watch it. And watch it with the American comms, watch it with the Sky comms. It doesn't matter. I don't care. Watch it with no comms. Just watch the fight. Because you're right. If there is a better 10th round, or better any round, or better come from behind round of boxing, I'd like to see it. Because for me, Corrales Castillo 1 stands as the number one on my list, and it should stand on the number one for most boxing fans of this generation's list as just extraordinary. It is everything that is unpredictable and dramatic that this quite stunning sport brings us. Number one, Jose Luis Castillo, Diego Corrales won forever.
Absolutely. I mean, what a list that is. And as we said at the start of the call, it's one where it really epitomizes boxing. Everything good about boxing you can take from each one of these 10 fights. So, Adam, thank you very much for sharing your stories, your journeys through these fights. And always, thank you for your time.
Here's James.